we're here today speaking with Nicholas Hulme. He is an EB5 program specialist with Rapid USA Consulting. Nicholas, welcome.
Thank you.
If you can please introduce you and your firm briefly.
Yeah, absolutely. My firm, we work with US developers who are experienced in their field, have raised capital domestically for projects, but have become interested in utilizing EB5. We work with those developers to help structure projects for them which would be applicable for use with EB5. It can be a long-winded process at times, but ultimately a good way to raise capital.
And now, what types of projects are they working on?
EB5 really, for the most part, is very strong in the real estate base. Hotels, obviously, is a major development, EB5. Certainly, there are other projects to use assisted living, for example, manufacturing-based projects, even infrastructure projects. The most important thing is that every project has to have a job creation component. In EB5, the EB part actually stands for employment-based. So on the basis of an investment, each investor has to create 10 or more US jobs.
Great. And can you tell us about EB5, what it is, and why developers are interested in it?
Absolutely. EB5 is actually a very old program. It was established more than 20 years ago by Congress. It was originally administered by the legacy INS. Currently it's administered by USCIS, which is a United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. Basically what it does, it allows foreign investors to be able to invest into projects in the United States, which would lead to job creation. It's really determined more that the projects preferably would be in an area of need, maybe a high unemployment area, maybe a rural area, but the way the projects are structured, they actually could all be almost anywhere in the US. The determining factor is that if it's a rural area or a high unemployment area, the minimum investment can be $500,000. If it's elsewhere, it can be $1 million as an absolute minimum.
Wow, okay, great. And now I'd like to talk to you about a recently closed transaction.
Recently closed transactions, okay. We'll go back to actually a hotel is a good example. Hotel development is possibly sometimes used too much in the USA, but certainly where we're concerned, we prefer to work with developers that do something a little different, a little bit unique. We recently worked with a hotel developer, very experienced hotel developer who's developed things throughout the US and actually outside of the US as well. Had traditionally raised capital domestically, and in this instance, still did the same, but actually brought in an EB5 component as well. The actual capital structure, the basis of it was private equity investment from the hotel developer and a small group of limited partners of the hotel developer. And then also there was a debt instrument from a US bank. And then also it was then supplemented with EB5 capital. The EB5 capital itself made up about 42% of the capital structure in its total. Through the project, they actually used as well some bridge financing too. The bridge financing was actually replaced by the EB5 capital as it came in. Okay,
great. And can you tell us about some of the other parties that were involved in this transaction?
Absolutely. Obviously, it's a very complex transaction. Certainly, in the case of EB5, because it's employment-based, you have to be able to show that jobs are going to be created. There's a couple of ways to do that. Obviously, if you buy a business, operate a business, you hire people independently, you show I-9s, W-2s, and things like that. It's very easy to show those jobs in that instance. In more complex transactions, especially in what they call a regional center, the government actually allows you to count jobs indirectly. Indirectly meaning the jobs that are created by other jobs. There's no real way to verify those in terms of I-9s and W-2s, but the way they would be verified would be through through accounting, through bookkeeping, showing that obviously from development, capital was spent, from operations, revenues were earned. Before a project becomes a project, we collaborate very closely with economists, present to them the actual overall capital structure of a project, also the projected revenues, which obviously need to be conservative because you don't want to miss them, you don't want to jeopardize the EB5 investor unnecessarily. But basically they would take those figures and obviously they would apply them to whichever econometric tool they want to use. In many instances it's a tool called Implan, and actually it produces a number of jobs that would be created from the capital infusion and from the actual revenues from the ongoing operations of a project. At the time that an EB5 investor would go to have a permanent green card issued, they would present that information to the Immigration Service to say, my capital was spent, and these are the amount of revenues that the project has earned, so we believe we've satisfied the job creation requirements.
And what would you say is the most challenging aspect of this deal?
Most challenging aspects of the deal, initially, from the EB5 investor standpoint themselves, obviously it's foreign capital that's coming into the country. For EB5 investors that are coming from Europe, it's really not a big deal because they're traditional countries, much like the US, where it's very easy to be able to count their funds, to be able to prove their funds. But as part of the program, the US Immigration Service has a very specific requirement. It's actually almost like the anti-money laundering requirements that broker-dealers see, but taken to another level. So you have to be able to show where those funds came from, how they originated, the source and the path of those funds, all the way from the investor's account through to a project escrow account. It can be challenging for certain countries. China, for example, has strenuous exchange controls. That can be difficult. Russia can be difficult for a myriad of reasons. Other countries which are in a similar situation, Bangladesh, Vietnam, it can be overcome, but it can be challenging. One of the other sides of the program that can be challenging as well is simply some of the misconceptions. Many of them exist. Some people see EB5 and they don't really understand it. They may have seen some of the press on EB5, which can raise uncertainty, but certainly there's bad press that can avail in any capital raise, whether it be through EB5 or certainly things like Madoff. So.
Sure. And one last question for you,
Sure.
Nicholas. What are some interesting takeaways from this deal, or any lessons learned?
Lessons learned and takeaways. The most important lesson is really, with any EB5 project, or any capital project for that matter, is to put as much foresight into the project as you can do before jumping into it head first. A little bit of time spent planning can solve many, many headaches after the fact. Certainly whether rules and regulations are applicable to the Immigration Service. By providing just an ounce of leeway in a business plan can solve what might be considered material change.
Sure.
So.
Great. That's great information, Nicholas. I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and meet with us.
Absolutely.